Hi, good afternoon. I'm your teacher. Well, in case you have doubts, look at my name. That's me. I'll be absent this afternoon because I'm a bit sick and I apologize for that. But nevertheless, we will continue our discussions about exceptions. Last meeting, we had discussions about exception handling in Java, and we were able to discuss errors, exceptions, runtime exceptions, and so forth, except for one topic, which is user defined exceptions. Now, as we go through this slide, we will know what user defined exceptions are and how to make the very basic user defined exception. Okay, so the contents of this slide or this presentation include a review of exceptions and errors. We also have making our own exceptions, of course. So what we've discussed so far, we've had discussions about exceptions and errors and the difference between both. And then we also discussed the class hierarchy for exceptions and errors. We also have runtime exceptions. And then what we need to discuss this afternoon is just a brief discussion. Creating exceptions defined by you. Well, this is how I deduce defining exceptions yourselves that become user-defined exceptions. It's kind of like a joke, actually. Well, let's trace this. This is fun. Well, this is an icebreaker before we proceed to the real meat. Defined by you, yes, you, sir, and you becomes you, sir becomes sir. Then we have user-defined exceptions. Okay, hope you got that. Well, anyway, let's move on to the meat of the discussion. We have exceptions versus errors. Okay, as you recall, exceptions are bugs that happen in your program when you happen to use arguments to certain methods, classes, or calls to certain methods by objects that do not exist. And these are the kinds of errors that can be checked and handled within code by using what? Try, catch, and finally blocks. Then, of course, since this is catchable, this is handled by users within code, then we can say that what? It allows us to recover from errors within our code, right? Yeah, how about errors? The errors kind of errors. Well, both are errors, exceptions and errors. However, errors are defined again as those errors that cannot be caught or handled in code that terminate your applications on the spot. And most of these errors often come as platform errors like JVM error again, AWT error for the user interface, and so forth. Then, how do we create UDEs? Well, what are UDEs? Those are user-defined expressions. That's just my acronym for it. I'm not quite sure if the Java world accepts it, but well, just for the sake of readability. Imagine I try to put user-defined exceptions on the header, on the title of the slide. Don't you think that would be quite small? Yeah, so let's proceed. There are actually 5 steps in making a user-defined expression. Okay, we have, well, a user-defined exception must, take note, it must extend the exception class. Okay, at the very least, exception class, because exceptions are a special kind of classes that stem from the exception superclass. So when the computer or when the JVM sees, oh, this is an exception, then it will allow you to be handled, or it will allow you to be thrown, not you, it will allow your class to be thrown when certain errors occur. Okay? Then, so let's name our class bad number. Although a good thing, I named it like this so that we can put corrections. Exception. Watch me use my mouse, type a word, or write a word. I'm not an artist, but I can really do some damage. So here you go. Public class bad number extend exception. Well, just like naming variables, it would be advantageous for us if we named our classes according to their uses. Because right off the bat, when you see bad number, or when I see bad number, what comes to mind is a question, oh, what? You're going to create an object for a bad number? Who would create an object for a bad number? But If you put in an exception, bad number exception, well, people will say, oh, this is an exception for a bad number. Very good. Now you see the difference? Yeah, naming makes a lot of difference in classes in Java or in any programming language for that matter. Let's proceed to step two. Now, here is it. Here's how you get the number from, or the number that you want to test, or the number that has been tested. Take note, the number that has been tested to fail the condition and be a bad number. As you can see, it does nothing here but assign your my number, which is a parameter or an argument from a class that will use this exception, and just store it into a variable. And then step three. Step three is the second method for your bad number class. It's string to string. What does this mean? Of course, it returns a string that tells you number cannot be negative, and of course tells you what the number is. And just by that, we see that the exception class is done. Then you ask me, sir, where do we compare or where do we find errors in the exception class? Yeah, right question. Good question. Well, we will see in step 5. But after this, let's move to step 4, which is a very important step, but a very simple one. Of course, defining the test class for your exception. How can you ever test your exception if you don't define a step class? No, it's not step class, sorry, test class. But, and how can you ever write your test methods if the class does not exist? So here we go. Here it is, ladies and gentlemen. There we go. So, the real meat of the process happens here. So this is your main method. And I recall it was Mr. Go who asked me, sir, what about throws? Do we use the throws keyword? Yeah, and I recall I told you that there are 2 keywords that sound like throws. In fact, it is spelled like throws. One, the throws, it's throw with an S, and the other one, throw, it's throws without an S. Okay? So where do we use throws and when do we use throw? Okay? So as you can see, upon declaring the method, the main method, it tells us blang main throws exception. So what does this mean? It means that we want to tell the compiler, or we want to tell all the objects that would use this object. Suppose this was a method in an object, an instance method and not the main method. We want to tell all the objects that, hey, this method throws an exception, meaning you can expect this method to throw an exception. Okay, that's what throws mean. So let's move on to the lines one by one. So we have int number, get number. Well, get number happens to be a method that returns -9. So this code is meant to make the main method fail so that it can squeal and return a bad number exception. So if we test the my number, obviously it's negative. So here's how you throw an exception. Throw bad number exception. Okay, so that's the syntax. Throw new bad number, my number. So that's where you go to back to step 2. It's passed as my number and it's taken in as an attribute within, and then it is printed if you do the toString. Alright, so the actual checking for errors actually happens within the method that is expected to throw that kind of exception and not in the exception itself. At the very least, yes, you can do that. So I think that's basically it. You can try this at home and you can try more exercises at home. If you've logged into the Matrix recently or lately, you can see that there are actually exercises about exceptions that I uploaded. You can try those so that you can master the art of exception handling in Java. And one more thing, throws exception, but why in the world does it throw bad number? Well, because bad number is of type exception, but it would be very, 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 very good if you clearly state the exception that your method would throw. Suppose you name it like this: public static void main drunk throws bad number, so that people can expect what kind of exception to catch when they use your methods in their try catch blocks. Okay? So those are points to remember. So that was all for the discussion today, and it was quite short. Thanks for giving me about 10 minutes of your time, and I apologize for not being there again. Probably I could be there by Wednesday if all goes well with my health, and please tell Mr. Lee that I will answer all his questions when I get back. Alright, class, thanks for coming. Good afternoon. See you next time.